Stacy DeGrandchamp was the all-American popular girl, the exact kind of archetype that you're thinking in the early 2000s. She was smart, she got along with everybody, she was popular, she was really good in school, she actually put effort into all of her studies. She was very well-rounded, and a lot of students felt like there was nothing that Stacy couldn't do. But Stacy had some soul to her because she grew up with a single parent mom. She didn't come from this perfect family where she had, an older brother that was 2 years older than her and both of her parents had been together for 30 years. No, back home, it was just she and her mom. And she was really kind of navigating the world, trying to understand men because she didn't have much of a father figure in her life. And her mom was rocking it. She was doing her best, And if you grew up in a single parent home with a mom, it can be complicated because mom has to put on this face of almost masculinity. She's got to be strong to keep the household together, right? While also being a woman that's trying to feel her emotions. So it's very interesting to me that Stacy was this all-American popular girl that we imagine in movies, but she had a home life that was similar to a lot of us. Somebody like Stacy is, of course, going to attract some other kind of archetype that we all know from high school. The insecure, the jealous, the kind of domineering, the mean girl, the bully. And that was Holly Boisvert. What's interesting about Holly is she also came from a home that had family struggles, but Holly chose a different path. She chose to put other people down to assert her power. For Holly, people were a means to get what she wanted, either them doing her favors or them making her look better. And people played in the sand with Holly because they didn't want to get on her bad side. So she had a lot of friends. And because she had so many friends that were kind of in high places, she got away with her bad attitude all the time, even though people knew exactly who Holly Boisvert was. Now, even though our bully, Holly, had some dumb dislike for Stacy from the beginning, things really started to boil to the surface when Stacy starts to see Holly's ex-boyfriend. And on August 15th, 2002, the two of them would get into a physical altercation, and only one of them would make it out alive. So in 2002, we are in Fort Wayne, Indiana. It's a pretty standard American town. There's lots of woods to go hiking in, little shopping centers, high schools. I mean, this place is pretty normal. In Sinister, we've been to poor towns. We've been to rich towns. We've been everywhere. This is probably one of the most normal places we've ever been. And in true Sinister fashion, because you guys know I love Christian cases, I love being in the Bible Belt, feels like home to me. This place was kind of well known for having a lot of churches around. It's literally called the City of Churches because there was a lot of faith, but also diversity here. And this is part of the reason why Stacy DeGrandchamp had those strong morals that I was telling you about earlier. Be a nice person, make friends with everybody, go to school, get your work done. It was like a good-hearted town, and she really soaked up that energy. Today's episode is sponsored by Squarespace. When I was growing up, building websites was difficult. You had to know all the HTML, the CSS, upload it to an FTP server, buy your domain. I mean, it was a nightmare. And so most people couldn't have websites. But nowadays, you want a website. So people take your business or your passion project not only seriously, but they know where to find all of the information in one place. I'm somebody that if I'm driving around looking for a restaurant or a hotel and I see it on maps, I immediately click the website button. It's 2024. If you're building something, you want to have it. And Squarespace makes it so incredibly easy. When I built my website, it took me 30 minutes from start to finish. And by start to finish, I mean picking the design, filling out the information, registering the domain, and setting up my monthly payment plan with Squarespace. Whether you just need a landing page for people to know more about you or your business, or if you want to sell courses, products, anything, Squarespace has it all, and they make it so easy. Also, if you're an analytics nerd like me, the backend on Squarespace is excellent. It shows you everything that you need to know just to make sure your business is growing, especially if you're a seller. You can go to squarespace.com/sinister and save 10% off of your first purchase of a website or domain. You can also just go to Squarespace and when you sign up, type in my code SINISTER. That way you get your 10% off. You can have a website to support your dream project today. I'm telling you, it's way too easy. So Stacy is going to Fort Wayne High School, and she's your typical blonde, happy, preppy cheerleader. She's on the volleyball team. And now I just want to remind you, Stacy did not come from a picture perfect home, but she had this kind of humility to her. And her friend Sarah said that she was so confident and beautiful. She likened her to a movie star, like somebody who was just walking the red carpet every day, happy, waving, sweet, but also confident at the same time. People legitimately loved Stacy. People either didn't have a problem with her or they really, really liked her. But of course, when you're somebody that everybody likes, you have this kind of like social status. There are sometimes people that come into the picture that, sure, they like you, but also they want to use you for your social status. And that's when Brandon Muff comes into the picture. I feel like this keeps coming up every episode where somebody's dating and there's these really big age gaps. But this one, because y'all know I'm gonna be making fun of Brandon this whole episode. This guy was a piece of garbage, okay? And he was a former graduate from Fort Wayne High School. So I'm so sorry, but like when you get out of high school, why would you go back to dating a high schooler? You know what I mean? Like there's age gap relationships and then there's dating somebody that went to the high school that you used to go to, that they still go to that high school and you're picking them up from school. Like he was 20 years old. He was gone. Go on, get Brandon, go. Holly Boisvert might have done something bad in her life regardless of this situation, but Brandon Muff is a huge part of this story. So Brandon starts hitting on Stacy and she's into it. She likes him. You know, he's kind of an older guy. He's cool. He's not cool. But like sometimes when girls are in high school and an older guy's interested in you, you feel like, oh, I must be cool. I must be mature or something. And remember, Stacy didn't have a father figure in her life. So she's kind of exploring the range of masculinity. You know, she's dating the bad boy or she's dating the good boy and just trying everything out to figure out where she fits in the world. And the other thing that is so annoying about this too is the bad boys, they got problems. So they love hard. And when they love hard, you feel like, oh my God, this is it. Sorry, I'm getting flashbacks because look, half of us have been caught up with the bad boy before, right? So she's young and she's enamored. And all Brandon has to do is drive his car and light up a cigarette. So eventually, Brandon and Stacy start dating. And then Stacy starts to hang out with more of Brandon's friends. And he had his own place. He lived on like a pretty crummy street. Like it was in a bad part of town. And Stacy would go over there and hang out with these other people that were just straight up burnouts. Which on one hand is fine because I feel like I was in a burnout group in high school and you got to kind of experience it and move through it and get through the other side. But this was such a drastic change for Stacy, who was like, pretty blonde volleyball team, you know, getting straight A's and B's. It was a big jump. Another big jump too was, remember I said Brandon had his own place? Well, there was no parental supervision at any of these parties. Whenever Stacy would go hang out with her friends, there were always parents around, Stacy's mom or her friends' moms or something. And it didn't really matter because they weren't doing nothing bad. But when she starts hanging out with Brandon and all of his friends, they can literally do whatever they want. So she meets a couple of other girls in the friend group. I'll kind of glaze through the names because I know when I'm telling these stories, sometimes if there's a lot of names, it can get really convoluted, especially if you're listening on audio and you can't see all of the faces. So I'll try to only really pull out the poignant names, glaze over a couple that you should know, and I'll try to also attach who they are briefly as I talk about them. But in this friend group, she meets a girl named Amanda, Whitney, and Holly. God, Holly is so annoying. Remember, Holly's our bully. Holly has a nasty attitude. Quite frankly, she's a bitch. She's the type of person where, like, you know, if you come and sit down at the lunch table and you're wearing a new outfit that's super cute, she's going to be like, what are you wearing? She's gonna put you down in some capacity, especially if you're on a high. But Holly gets away with this because she always throws these really big house parties. There would be like 20 or 30 kids in the neighborhood there. She didn't have a lot of supervision either. And when you're somebody that throws parties, you get a lot of leniency because everybody wants to get invited. So at Holly's house, people were playing pool, people were drinking, they're out on the back patio smoking. Like, you want to get invited to a Holly Boisvert hangout, so you're going to be cool with her. And also, as long as you don't get on her bad side, she's not too bad. So it's Amanda, Whitney, you don't need to remember them too much, and Holly, okay? But one thing that's very important about this is they're kind of a trio of three. And threes are always off balance. In fact, groups of threes never really come together without a pack leader. And of course, the pack leader is Holly, but there's just this social hierarchy that comes together slowly with that group. You know, a lot of times the personality types in this might be, not always, but it might be. And think back to this, because if you've ever been in a three before, maybe you might identify with this a little bit. In these friendship groups, you might kind of have the follower. This person might be just fun, down for whatever. They're kind of wishy-washy. They could go either way. They're usually going to cling on to whatever's popular in the moment, and they're just always kind of down. And then there's this other person that's kind of like struggling with their identity, but whenever the leader of the group says like, hey, you're doing good, they feel like they belong and they kind of stick around. And then of course, we have the leader of the group. So there's always a leader, and then these two personality types that are kind of confused and just going with the flow, and they want somebody to move the boat forward. And of course, this girl is Holly. Holly decides what they're doing that night. Holly decides if they're having a party that night. Holly decides who they're going to pick on. Holly decides who do they hate. And a lot of times these trios have an extreme power imbalance. But when the people in these trios have somebody to dislike, they start to intimacy bond over a common enemy. And as Stacy starts to come into these parties a little bit more because she's dating Brandon, Holly decides we don't like her. Holly's a bully. So she tries to make it seem like she doesn't like Stacy because she's not cool. She's just a goody two-shoes. She's annoying. She's young. Like, what is she even doing here? She doesn't belong. And that's kind of the front that she puts out. And people buy into it for some reason. But there's a different reality to this. There's two major reasons why Holly doesn't like Stacy. One, because Holly used to date Brandon Muff a little bit ago before they got together. And she's mad about it. Maybe Holly didn't want to get broken up with. Maybe Holly still liked it. Who knows, right? But she hates that Brandon is parading around his new girlfriend. And Holly pretty much feels like she has to invite her to the parties if she wants Brandon to come. And then two, another reason why Holly doesn't like Stacy is because at a pool party, I can't believe I'm saying this, at a pool party in middle school, one time Stacy was having too much fun in the pool and she splashed Holly, and Holly never got over it. She never got over the disrespect, her perceived disrespect, right? Those are literally the main reasons why Holly does not like her. Honestly, all of this stems from insecurity. Maybe she got embarrassed or a little triggered when she got splashed and didn't know how to approach it or resolve it. Maybe she's jealous that Stacy is such a goody two-shoes and she has the ability to be a nice girl that's liked by people, do well in school, and hang out with the crew that Holly hangs out with. Oh yeah, she's jealous of that. And to top it all off, they're dating the same guy. It's a complete recipe for jealousy. But it's very important to remember, Stacy did nothing wrong. Stacy didn't do anything wrong. She's dating the guy she likes. She's having fun in the pool. And she's just being who she is. And Holly can't stand it. It happens all the time with different archetypes, different friend groups, all of that. Like, this is just so common. So Brandon's having parties, Holly's having parties, other friends are having parties. Like, there's just so much crossover. And every single time, Holly feels like she has to see Stacy, on Brandon's arm. And it drives her crazy. No, this is very important. For many years, Stacy and Holly kind of avoided each other because they weren't in the same circles. And Whitney, one of the girls in the trio, she would later say in police interviews that they did not like each other. They were not friends. They did not want anything to do with each other. And I really want you to remember that detail for later in the investigation. Now, remember when I said that there was that thing called intimacy bonding over a common enemy, and how I also said that usually the other two people in the trio were kind of confused and they're like, who do we hate? What are we doing today? What's the move? Well, Holly, the bully, can't stop thinking about Stacy. She can't stop thinking about it. So she starts to rant all the time to Whitney, like Stacy is this horrible, horrible person. And Whitney, who like has no brain and is just like going with the pack leader for safety, she starts to say like, yeah, I hate Stacy too. I hate her too. She's the worst. You know, I think I saw her talking to my ex-boyfriend too. She's a hoe. She's such a hoe. And Holly's like, yeah, like it's working, you know? And they're kind of building this little ball of hate against Stacy. And this is also a way that the pack bonds. Now, I want to mention that there was a recent show where Whitney was interviewed. And before I tell you about this voicemail coming up that was pretty important in the investigation, I really do want to point out that in the interviews on the show, Whitney seems to have a lot of remorse for things that happened, how she acted, and she really seems like she felt like she was led astray by Holly, and she wouldn't do these kind of things now. She wouldn't team up on somebody that didn't do anything. The amount of remorse and reflection that she seemed to have was really, really astounding. So I'm going to tell you what Whitney called her up and said on this day, but I just want to remind you that, 20 years later, everybody's looking at this like, oh my God, what did I do? I wish she was still here. Now, in a bid for Whitney to get Holly's favor, she's ganging up on Stacy and she calls her and she leaves this voicemail. And she says, "Stacy, this is Whitney. You need to stop telling lies. And when you get this, you do not need to get a hold of me because otherwise some people are looking for you." This voicemail was important because later on, the girls would go to say, "No, we were friends with Stacy. We don't know what happened. This is terrible." And it's like, well, why did you leave this voicemail? Whitney is the confused friend in the trio, right? She doesn't know why she's doing anything. She's just looking for safety by, nuzzling up with the leader. But reminder, she was very, very young. So not only is this voicemail threatening, but it also shows, one, they were not friends. They were not on good terms like they claimed to be. So what else were they lying about? And two, it shows that they were looking to fight her. I mean, the verbiage, some people are looking for you. Oh yeah, somebody wanted to brawl. Holly's got a teammate in her unjustified hate towards Stacy. She's feeling a bit more empowered, and she wants to take this opportunity to further ostracize Stacy even more. So she ramps up her attacks. You already know, there is nothing I love more than a sponsor that I actually use. And today's is ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free website and app that you can use to search and compare highly rated doctors that are in your insurance network nearby you to pick the best one that has availability that you need. Once you find the doctor that you want, you can book them immediately. I'm not kidding. This system is crazy. And the first time that I tried ZocDoc, before we even started working together, I always tell you guys that. It's true. I needed an ear, nose, and throat doctor, and it was daunting, feeling like I needed to go to my primary care, explain to them the problems, pay fees for that, and then get a recommendation for an ear, nose, and throat. No. I literally just put in my location, search for ENTs, and then I had an appointment the next day. It was incredible. You can filter ones that specifically take your insurance, or if you need somebody on the fly, they show their rates on the website, and you could just book and pay out of pocket if you need to. The typical wait to see a doctor is 24 to 72 hours. And sometimes you can even get a same-day appointment. It's crazy. I love ZocDoc, and once you find a doctor that you regularly go to, you can still book your appointments there on ZocDoc. No need to call the office, wait a month or 2 months for scheduling. It's all right there. It's actually amazing. So today, I don't even have a discount code for you. It's all free. Go to ZocDoc.com/Sinister to sign up for free because I need them to come back as a sponsor because I love ZocDoc and I want to tell as many people about it as possible. Once again, it's ZocDoc.com/Sinister. Let's go back to Brandon Muff for a minute. You remember the guy that graduated that keeps driving up to the high school to pick up his very youthful girlfriend? His youthful girlfriend that had everything going for her? His youthful girlfriend that he should have stayed away from? That guy, Brandon? I have some words for him. You guys know, Sinister is a show where we only cover female killers. And also, if that's of interest to you, don't forget, subscribe to the channel and rate the podcast 5 stars because it really helps us out. And look, the reason that I like to cover female killers is because I think their crimes are more complex. I think they're emotional. They can be manipulative. There's a lot of pieces involved. Meanwhile, a lot of times when I dig into cases that are committed by men, it's sexually motivated or just overly violent or something like that. But of course, there's other type of men, right? There's petty men. And Brandon was a petty man that wasn't very smart. See, he's not concocting all of these crazy manipulative plans that, get somebody from point A to point C of what they want. He's the type of guy where he wants a little attention and validation, so he's just gonna poke the bear. That's what some guys do. Guys want attention and validation just as much as the rest of us, especially somebody like Brandon who had a pretty troubled life growing up and didn't really know who he was and wanted the attention of women. Sometimes, not everyone, some of you guys have pulled the sheet off of how some guys can be, but sometimes we tend to not see men as petty or dramatic because that's not normally a trait that we saw like in our dads or our brothers maybe. Like they were just always kind of like stone cold and emotionless. But some guys are fucking drama queens, man. Some of them love the drama, some of them love poking the bear, and some of them love attention. And that's who Brandon was. Behind the scenes, Stacy did not have his full attention. He was talking to Holly sometimes too. And he loved playing both sides. This is somebody where his cup is never full. So he needs attention from Stacy. He needs attention from Holly. He needs attention from somebody over here. And oh my God, we can multiply the attention if we see them fight over me. I'm so important if both of these girls fight over me. Like, not only am I just siphoning attention and energy directly from them, but it's just so much more when they're mad at each other because they want me so bad. And like, that's who Brandon was. People said that bad girl Holly really was kind of hoping that she and Brandon would get back together one day. But, she was always putting up a front and acting like that's not what she wanted. But Brandon knew. He could tell. These types of guys, these like player guys, as much as you try to play cool girl sometimes, they know that you like them. They know. And so Holly was trying to act like, it was just kind of whatever and they could just be friends. While deep down inside, she wanted him so desperately. I'm talking Helga Pataki over here, okay? Gum shrine in the closet. And Brandon kind of knew this. It seemed like he really liked Stacy, but Stacy's love, no matter how pure it is, it's not enough to make him stop hating himself. So he needs more. He needs drama. He needs excitement. He needs more love. So he's still talking to Holly on the side. Sometimes he would talk shit about Stacy to Holly, and he's just kind of giving them both little doses of like what they want. But what Brandon really wants in his like grade level 1 manipulator world is, I want to see which one of them likes me more. Like, God, he's so like peanut brained, but he just wants attention. I think this is really interesting because there's so many dudes like this. The emotionless boy, he's actually like this. Did you guys know? Sorry, I'm going to rant right now. Did you guys know that there's Discord dating servers? I am not promoting these. I'm saying that this is a problem, okay? Lurking in the shadows are guys just like Brandon Muff who were on a little Discord dating server and talking to 5 different girls and then making all those girls hate each other. Brandon Muffs are everywhere, but we don't normally attribute these kind of traits to guys because sometimes y'all be acting really dumb. Not everybody. This is like such a specific like boy kind of like archetype, right? but we just don't attribute manipulative drama queen to these types of guys because they sit there and they try to play cool so hard. But he is somebody that his self-esteem is never full, but he comes off as so cool and so confident. So now on August 15th, 2002, it's kind of a weird day. There's another party that night, and Stacy, she kind of wants to go. She wants to go see Brandon. She wants to go hang out with all of her burnout friends. Her friends that she's with that evening, they don't really want to go because Brandon's house is in a bad part of town, and, you know, she still has her good girlfriends. So Stacy is not really sure if she wants to go to that side of town or just, you know, stay with these friends. But another girl ends up calling Stacy and saying like, hey, are you coming tonight? And this is kind of weird because normally people don't follow up on these party invites. Like, that's what this seemed like. It didn't seem like, are you going? Because I'm thinking about going. It seemed like, hey, are you coming or not? It was kind of weird. You know, normally these parties are just like, hey, drop the address. You know, if you go, you go. But when Stacy's friend called her, she kind of felt like, you know, maybe something fun is happening that night. Maybe it's going to be a really big party. She was like, okay, you know what? I really want to go. So she asked her friends, the ones that didn't want to go, will you guys just drop me off? And they're like, yeah, I guess. And then we'll come back and pick you up at 11:30. And she's like, okay, cool. So on this day, it was a Thursday. Stacy pulls up to the party and Brandon is sitting on the porch hanging out with Holly. Now, Brandon didn't get caught hanging out with Holly because he was actually the person that kind of wanted Stacy to come. I don't think he knew like Stacy was coming at this exact moment, but Holly and Brandon did know that Stacy was coming to the party because they wanted her to come. And I also think that this was another way of Brandon kind of poking the bear. He knows that Stacy's gonna arrive at some point. And he's sitting up here with Holly, and he knows that both of them fucking hate each other. Everybody in the school knew that they hated each other, but also Brandon was right in between them. So he heard both of them talk and spit about each other, right? He's such a little instigator, and it's so subtle that it's like most people can't really call him out on it because it seems like he's just, you know, like hanging out, like, oh yeah, Holly, my ex or something like that. But like everything is actually so much more intentional. But also, reminder, I know how this story ends, so I have a little bit of extra information, but I'll get you there. So when Stacy gets to the party, I mean, she literally had just walked up. Holly gets so upset. She gets so disgusted. You know, she's got to put on her tough face as usual. And Holly's like, what is she doing here? Like, what does this bitch think that she's doing? Because things had just really ramped up between them at this point. But also, Holly had a plan, and so she was really amping herself up. She gets right in her face, and the two of them start yelling because Stacy is done with her crap at this point. Like, I mean, I've told you the whole story from A to B so far. Do you agree that Stacy hasn't done anything wrong? It really kind of just breaks my heart. Like, if Holly was not in the picture, Stacy would have just cruised on through, dated Brandon for like, you know, 4 months or something. They break up and she's like, oh, I don't like the bad boys anymore. And then just goes to college, something like that. You know, that is actually kind of what happened because at this point, Stacy and Brandon had kind of broken up because Stacy wanted to go to college and it was evident that Brandon wasn't going to like follow her there and they weren't committed enough to do a long distance relationship because things were already on the rocks, right? So they're in a spot where Stacy still kind of wants to see Brandon, but now that Stacy has broken up with him to go to college, Brandon is now talking to his ex, Holly, again. And because Holly feels like she's in with Brandon again, she's got to defend that. And so she gets right up in Stacy's face on this day and they start yelling. They get into this big argument. And because Stacy doesn't need to keep her cool anymore around Brandon, like, fuck this guy, and she knows it. She's saying it with her whole chest. She's saying everything that she's wanted to say to Holly Boisvert for the past couple of years. And of course, an actual physical fight breaks out. And this isn't really a fair fight because Holly, she's a little like more stocky than Stacy. Stacy is very thin. And also Holly is a few inches taller than her, okay? Like, I don't know their exact heights, but let's say Stacy's like 5'1" and Holly's like 5'5". That's a pretty big difference. When you add in extra weight, when you add an extra muscle, you add an extra height, it's just not a fair fight. And also, Holly comes from, kind of like a bad home that there's no rules, there's no nothing. She's been in fights before. This is like pretty normal for her. It's just not a fair fight. But during the course of the fight, Stacy starts beating her ass. Let me tell you something. Holly is jealous of Stacy through and through. But Stacy is done with Holly's shit, okay? When you're 16 years old, you don't have fighting tactics. You don't know, like, that's not what this is all about. A lot of it, honestly, is about emotion. And somebody that is done with your shit and hates you, they're gonna beat the crap out of somebody that's just jealous. Like, it's a different level of energy force. And Stacy is giving it her all. And also, don't forget, Stacy is an athlete. Everyone crowds around watching this, as they always do in high school. And I think every single person outside that day expected Holly to win. But Stacy comes through and she's winning the fight. She has Holly on the ground. Witnesses said this. She had Holly on the ground and she was kicking her in the head. Stacy was up. She was up 2 feet on the ground. Holly, hands up, begging for mercy, wishing she had never picked this fight to begin with. Somehow, Holly is able to wipe Stacy off of her feet, and they crash down into some recycling bins. Within a few seconds, Holly emerges and brushes herself off, walks away, and Stacy is still down. Something has happened, and Stacy has gone from the winning underdog that everybody's cheering on to suddenly she's out of the fight. Stacy's only been down for a few seconds, and Holly's not completely out of Stacy's sights. And Brandon thinks like, oh my God, like Stacy's about to get back up and beat the crap out of this girl. So he goes and pulls her by the ankles to get her away from Holly. So he says. And other witnesses said that at this point, Stacy got up and she seemed very disoriented and tried to walk away, and then she collapsed. And that's when Brandon realizes there's blood all over her shirt. There's blood everywhere. And they decided to call an ambulance because Stacy is bleeding out. And now the party goes from a big, exciting fight night to a state of confusion because this all happened very fast. So at 10:50 p.m., the officers and ambulances arrive on the scene. Stacy's taken out into an ambulance and rushed out of the party while the police start to question everybody because how did this escalate? How did it get to this point? When police start speaking to witnesses, somebody actually mentions that earlier in the night, before Stacy even got there, Holly was walking around the party bragging, saying, quote, DeGrandchamp is going to take a fucking whipping tonight. Which is crazy because Holly got her ass beat, bro. Like, she was so confident, so mad. That's what a lot of these fights are about. It's about proving I'm better than this person because I can beat them up, right? It's like a notch on her belt. That's what she was trying to do. She had emotionally beaten her down. She had socially ostracized her. And now she was going to, basically deal the final blow by beating her up in front of everyone. That is what part of the goal of this party was. After they spoke with everyone at the scene of the crime, it was obvious that the two people that were the most involved in this were Holly Boisvert and Brandon Muff. So they get taken to the police station. They're put in separate rooms and questioned about what happened that night. And Brandon said, well, they fell into the recycling bin, so I think that maybe Stacy fell on something, like fell on some broken glass or something. And Holly gets taken in and she says, well, I don't know what happened. I have no idea. And all while this is happening, Stacy DeGrandchamp is at the hospital and they're trying to save her life because they realize that she's been stabbed twice, once in the chest and once in the stomach. And these are deep cuts. They're having trouble keeping her alive. Brandon, stupid Muff, and Holly, stupid Boisvert, are let go that night and they can return home. But the next day, Stacy DeGrandchamp succumbs to her injuries and she dies in the hospital. Now, Holly Boisvert is on the hook for murder. So the investigators are piecing together their case, and usually this involves multiple interviews with who they believe the perpetrator is. And they collect information in between to see if the perpetrator changes their story and to collect more information to press them on. So the next big interview with Holly doesn't come for like a month later. And now Holly's got a news story. Stacy, all-American volleyball nice girl Stacy, she was the aggressor. Holly claims that they were friends. They were good friends, but one day Stacy just turned on her and started being really mean to her. Textbook projection, because that's what Holly did to her. That's the story she goes with to the police, that Stacy was aggressive to her at the party and she had been mean to her for a few months and Holly didn't know why. Like, she's just full on playing victim at this point. I mean, part of this is true because Stacy really was clearing her, but she tells the officers, Stacy came up to me and she grabbed my hair. But remember, Holly's acting like she just doesn't know why this is happening. And she said Stacy grabbed her and she had her on the ground. And Holly said she was kicking me so hard in my head that I couldn't see. Probably true. But it's not because Stacy just lost her marbles. It's because Holly was being a bitch and she was trying to pick a fight. Holly was the one that started the fight. And this time when the police asked, well, Stacy got stabbed, so how do you think she got those injuries? Holly said, well, we fell into the recycling bins and maybe she fell on something there. So at this point, they kind of know that Brandon and Holly are syncing up, or at least trying to, on their stories. But police have to find a motive in this too. The wounds on Stacy were absolutely not from broken glass. Not only that, but they later went back to the scene of the crime because Brandon told them that night that maybe she fell on something and there was nothing dangerous around the recycling bins. But they didn't even need that detail. These were very clearly knife wounds and they were deep. But why would Holly go as far as to stab Stacy? It's hard to prove, but it makes complete sense. Holly Boisvert was seen as tough. She was seen as the school bully. She was somebody that people didn't want to mess with. And when she started bragging about this fight, saying that Stacy was going to get a whipping tonight, it was a damage to her credibility when she was losing the fight. And Holly was losing the fight hard. So it makes total sense to police in that moment that maybe Holly would have stabbed Stacy just to not lose the fight, not to damage her reputation and her credibility as the tough guy. But where's the knife? From the coroner's report, they said that it was a single-edged bladed knife. Investigators had taken knives from inside the house, in the kitchen. They looked around the whole area to see if one was discarded, and they didn't see one anywhere. So still, Brandon and Holly are allowed to be released. But let's go back to the day that Stacy was stabbed, about a month ago. This is where Rita comes in. And Rita is Stacy's mother. Remember I told you before that she had a single parent mom. She didn't have siblings. Her dad wasn't around. Stacy was Rita's only daughter. Oh my God, that devastates me so much. I mean, Rita later said that the day that her daughter was taken to the hospital from being stabbed, she went into complete shock. An emotional shock can last hours, probably sometimes even days, and it's where the body just completely numbs everything out so you can operate kind of top level, but everything feels like a fog. It feels like a dream sometimes. And Rita was in shock from the moment that Stacy was admitted into the hospital till way past they had told her the next day that her only daughter that she had raised so well to be a kind, loving, studious, happy girl had passed away. Of course, Rita wanted answers, but at this time, her priority was honoring her daughter. And so she put together the funeral on August 19th, 2002. They held the funeral for her daughter. And of course, Holly didn't show up. That would be crazy if Holly showed up. It really would. But Brandon did show up. And I don't think anybody wanted his ass there either. The other annoying thing is so many kids from school and from the party came to the funeral, but nobody was really talking. That detail I gave you earlier about when Holly said that Stacy was going to get a whipping that night was one of the rare details that they got that night. All of these kids that were at the party, they didn't say anything. whether it was to be cool, whether it was like just to be in a pact, whether they didn't want to be involved, whether they were scared of Holly, that they didn't want to be a snitch, whatever. They really didn't say anything. And as Rita is coming out of this shock of being without her daughter, it's crazy because the police don't have any leads. The rumor started spreading in school that Holly Boisvert killed Stacy, but there was no proof, no further push in the investigation. Nobody had found the weapon. There was no nothing. And quite frankly, this did something interesting to Holly's reputation. It boosted it in the fact that she was even more dangerous, but also it made people scared of her in a, get the fuck away from me kind of way. Like, that's what it would do to me for sure. I don't think you're cool if you kill somebody. I don't want to be in your circle for protection. I will move to another state. Get away from me. More rumors start to circulate that Brandon and Holly had maybe planned it together, that they had this big plan to humiliate Stacy, Stacy for breaking up with Brandon and Holly for whatever. They said that this was a rumor, but to me, this is more like people seeing the reality of what was going on. Brandon can sit there and play cool guy all he wants, but he was bitter and he was upset that Stacy was going to leave him, move on, go to college, and live a happy, beautiful life. Even despite all of the rumors and the obvious storyline and motive and the fact that Holly Boisvert was physically aggressive with the woman before she died, police get hung up on the fact that they can't find the murder weapon. They can't prove it. And for 17 years, Stacy DeGrandchamp's case goes cold. Unbelievably, this happened in 2002. That is miles. That is light years away. It feels like a dream. We are all the way back in 2019, which was really just a few years ago from me recording this. Can you believe the time jump from 2002 to 2019? And the shock for Rita has worn off, and there's anger. There's a need for justice. There's probably resentment towards Holly Boisvert, the police department, and everything. And this is seething through her. Rita's only daughter had been taken away, and nobody did anything. In fact, all of these kids, these witnesses, they essentially aided and abetted by not giving any information, just trying to keep their head low. It's messed up, bro. Now, Stacy may not have had brothers and sisters, but she did have a cousin, a woman named Jamie. And Jamie can't let it rest. Why should she? Her cousin was taken away from her, and everyone knows who did it, and she's still walking around the city. Oh, I'd be so mad, bro. When I think about this case, the shock, the tragedy that Rita went through losing Stacy, that seems like the moment. That seems like the worst of it all. And truly, it is horrible. But the 17 years that Holly Boisvert was walking around the city must have been just gut-wrenching, dude. So Jamie McMillan goes on a quest for justice. This would be me, bro. Now, there's a guy named Brian Martin, and he's a homicide detective that mostly works on cold cases in the city, which, by the way, I always try to remind you guys, having passionate people in investigative justice, police work, or anything is really, really, really important. So if you love this stuff, go to school and go work in the cold case department, because there are so many cases that need justice, and the information is all there. Well, Jamie ends up sending over this voicemail, the one that Whitney left years ago where she was threatening Stacy. She sends it to this cold case detective, and he reopens the case. Now, when we have these new detectives, it's not only a fresh set of eyes, but it's somebody that's going to see this all clearly and not get overwhelmed with new cases going in. Like, his job is to focus on these cold ones. The other thing is, it has been 17 years. These people are now probably in their 30s. And as you get older and you mature and you grow out of those childish tendencies, people might have some remorse. They might realize that they didn't do anything wrong, but they have information that could really help. And so Brian goes to talk to everyone again years later, just to see if they're feeling differently about it all. So Martin goes to Whitney's house because they consider her kind of a suspect in all of this. And he asks her about the voicemail. And, years later, she claims, dude, I'm so sorry. This totally is a lie. But she claims it was a warning to Stacy that people were looking for her. I still think that this voicemail was to appease Holly, but I also do think that Whitney really feels like it was wrong. After talking to Whitney, Detective Martin realizes that, okay, some of these people have not only matured, but they know more about this, and maybe that guilt is weighing on them. So he kind of changes his approach to lean in more on that, almost come to Jesus. Like, do you want to say anything that you want to get off of your chest? That's kind of his angle when speaking with everyone again. The detective rounds up a couple of different people. One was this girl, Abby, who was one of Stacy's friends, and they don't get much out of her. She denies seeing a weapon. She denies knowing anything. Another was one of the school staff members, a lady named Elton Powers, and they just wanted to know, what do you know about Holly, the bully? Like, what was she like? And Elton tells them, well, she was always in my office for truancy. Truancy is when you just completely miss school or classes. She was just like a problem child. Even 17 years later, Elton did not have any sympathy or any fond memories of Holly Boisvert. And then Brandon Stupid Muff is also interviewed. It seems like the past 17 years have really, really weighed on him. It seems like he almost feels guilty, but no new information is revealed. The detective is really asking people too, what do they think of Holly? Because he needs to understand this character more, the main suspect. And even though everyone's processing their feelings differently about the case, the overall sentiment is that Holly Boisvert got away with murder. Finally, in April 2019, Detective Martin hunts down Holly in a place called Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. She had eventually moved out of the city, probably because everybody knew she did it. Now, I'm going to do something that I don't normally do in Sinister, but I think that this is really important. For audio listeners, you'll be able to hear, and I'll try to describe a little bit of what's happening in the video. But for YouTube viewers, you'll be able to see it all. Now, if you either want to check this out in the YouTube video or look it up yourself, the video is called ID Highlights Fort Wayne Stabbing in New Series. And it's an actual video that the detective recorded the day that he interviewed Holly Boisvert. And her mannerisms are unsettling. That day, when the detective rang the doorbell, he said that it took Holly quite some time to come to the door. And when she answered, he said that he introduced himself as a detective that was working on a cold case. And immediately, Holly's face went pale. Detective Martin asked if he could record the session, to which Holly agreed. Holly's demeanor in this video is very strange. She kind of is like holding her fists or her hands together like in an anxious way, not in an aggressive way. Kind of her sleeve covering the top part of it. She sits down and adjusts herself multiple times, almost like she's trying to adjust herself into a position that's calm. One hand over on the knee, one just kind of leaning on the couch. She seems kind of calm, but she's also smiling a lot, and it's very strange. She starts off by saying that nothing makes sense because all of them were friends.
Nothing makes sense about the whole thing.
How so?
Everybody there, we were all friends.
When Holly says, everybody there, we were all friends, she puts her hands up in this almost ridiculous toddler-like fashion. I think there's actually a gif where there's like this little girl that's saying, I don't know. And that's exactly what Holly is doing with her hands. It's like a toddler that doesn't know how to lie. You guys have heard the story from A to Z here. They were not friends. They were enemies. And so Holly saying this is just very, very silly. She's not a good liar.
But you and Stacy had kind of had a little beef going on because of Brandon.
It was so stupid.
I agree. It was like one of those just petty high school girl things, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so
I know everybody says that I did something to her. Intentionally, I never would have pulled a knife on her.
Her language is so strange here, but also for people that are just listening, Holly is smiling a lot through this. Now, I'm not somebody that really likes to lean into body language too much, but if you've seen somebody exhibit duper's delight before, you know it when you see it. Usually, duper's delight is when somebody lies and the other person continues the conversation, so the duper thinks that they've gotten away with it, and sometimes they let out a really small, almost involuntary smile. It's like a micro expression, and that is just riddled through Holly's video. It doesn't come off as though she's nervously laughing through this. It's like she's smiling about something.
We were terrible bitches to each other, but she was still my friend. I didn't expect that we were gonna fight.
Another lie. Now, this is interesting because the detectives later caught wind that Holly always kept a pocket knife with her for protection, but this pocket knife was never found during the investigation. So Detective Martin decides to ask her directly about this, and you're not going to believe what her response to this question is.
Did you have your pocket knife with you that day?
I didn't even have it with me. Like, if it was there, it was in my bag. It's not like I walk around holding it.
In the video, after being asked if she had her pocket knife now, Holly gets up and she goes to grab it. Killers sometimes keep artifacts of their murders. Now, if you guys watch a lot of true crime, you're probably thinking of two things right now in regards to this knife. One, probably the Krista Pike case. Absolutely insane. And two, what happens when somebody is killed with a knife? Usually that blood seeps into the handle of the knife. Somebody may clean it top level, even take a little Q-tip and go through and through. But when that blood seeps into the handle, it needs to be unscrewed in order to clean it thoroughly. And most people, especially Holly stupid Boisvert, are not going to take the measures to do this. So Holly handing this knife over to Detective Martin is also, which lends a little bit of hand to that theory about the duper's delight. She thought she was so smart that she could hand him the knife and still get away with it. Like, this is somebody that got away with murder for 17 years. You have no idea what else she's done, because now she thinks she's so smart. She didn't even go to trial. She didn't go to court. This is no punishment for her. I also tried to consider for a minute, is there a world where Holly Boisvert felt guilty about what she had done and maybe she wanted to get caught? And then I realized I do not think that. I think that Holly was just really, really dumb. I think that she was dumb and she thought she was smart. That's what I personally think would happen. But you decide. You let me know. She not only showed him the knife, but she gave it to him. And Detective Martin took that knife in and he confirmed that that was the knife that was used to kill Stacy DeGrandchamp. And although there was actually no blood on the knife years later, they were actually able to determine that this knife was the exact size to have caused Stacy's wounds. And the fact that it was in Holly's possession, it was her. Holly was arrested on March 25th, 2020, just a couple of years ago. But the thing that broke the case wide open was later on, when Amanda Richards, one of her friends from the trio, was questioned. Amanda said, "Holly had me hold her knife in my purse. And then, later on in the night, Holly asked for the knife back. She said, I didn't think anything of it, and I just gave it back to her." Finally, not only did we have the weapon, but we had a witness statement that linked the knife to the entire situation. Holly was charged with murder and a crime that has a 65-year sentence in Indiana. And though it happened when she was 16 years old, she was charged as an adult, and rightfully so. The state offers Holly a plea deal, and finally, she admits that she stabbed Stacy DeGrandchamp in what she describes as sudden heat. She thought she was going to lose the fight, and she couldn't handle it. She was sentenced January 14th, 2022. Holly pled guilty to voluntary manslaughter, which is a 25-year sentence. Holly is doing time at the Indiana Women's Prison, and her earliest release date is actually 2030. And even though nobody likes an early release date for killers, one silver lining of this all is Rita finally got a little bit of relief. Rita and Jamie, who pursued justice for Stacy. And they came out later and really praised Detective Martin for putting in the work to close this terrifying 20-year saga.